The global economy is a complex machine, a vast and intricate network that connects every corner of the planet. Every day, millions of transactions take place, unseen by most of us, but vital to the way we live. From the food on our tables to the technology in our pockets, the world's economies are interwoven in ways that are both remarkable and at times precarious. This system is built on trillions of dollars in goods and services crossing borders daily. Massive container ships glide across oceans, trains and trucks rumble over land, and planes soar through the skies, all carrying the products and resources that fuel our modern lives. Each shipment represents not just commerce but the livelihoods of millions, workers, business owners, and families who depend on the smooth flow of trade. Each item, from your phone to your car, is a link in the vast chain of global trade. The smartphone in your hand may have components from a dozen countries, assembled in another and shipped to your local store. The car you drive could be the result of a global collaboration, with parts sourced from 3 continents. Even the groceries in your basket often travel thousands of miles before reaching your home. This system, while powerful, is incredibly fragile, relying on trust and shared rules. Like a line of dominoes, a single disruption can set off a chain reaction. International agreements, handshake deals, and mutual understanding keep the gears turning. But when that trust is shaken, the consequences can ripple across the globe, affecting economies big and small. When a major player like the US makes a sudden move, the entire structure can tremble, affecting everyone from Ohio to Shanghai. A policy change in Washington can send shockwaves through factories in China, markets in Europe, and farms in the American Midwest. The interconnectedness of global trade means that no nation acts in isolation. Every decision has far-reaching effects. President Trump's aggressive tariffs reshaped America's global relationships, sparking trade wars and tensions. These tariffs, aimed at protecting American industries, instead triggered retaliatory measures from trading partners. Suddenly, goods became more expensive, supply chains were disrupted, and uncertainty gripped businesses around the world. The headlines were filled with talk of trade wars, and the world watched anxiously as the situation escalated. The world watched as supply chains rerouted and diplomatic tensions flared. Companies scrambled to find new suppliers, reroute shipments, and adapt to rapidly changing rules. Diplomats worked overtime, negotiating behind closed doors to prevent further escalation. For many, it felt like the very foundation of global trade was being tested in real time. This tension reached a boiling point in the US Supreme Court. The highest court in the land became the stage for a dramatic showdown, as legal experts, politicians, and business leaders awaited a decision that could reshape the balance of power in American trade policy. A landmark case challenged the president's authority to impose tariffs single-handedly. At stake was not just a question of economics but of constitutional power. Who truly controls the levers of trade in the United States? The courtroom drama unfolded as arguments were made, documents examined, and the nation held its breath. The court's decision has shaken American trade policy, redefining Congress and the White House's roles. No longer can sweeping tariffs be imposed without oversight. The balance of power has shifted. Legal analysts debated the implications on live television, while lawmakers and officials scrambled to understand what this new era would mean for their agendas. For businesses, it offers potential stability, the rules of the game are clearer, and the threat of sudden, unpredictable tariffs is reduced. Factory owners, exporters, and small business operators can plan for the future with a bit more confidence, knowing that major changes will require broader consensus. For consumers, there is hope for relief from rising prices. Tariffs often mean higher costs at the checkout counter, as businesses pass on expenses to shoppers. With new checks on executive power, families may see more stable prices on everyday goods. But even as some worries ease, new questions arise. How will this affect ongoing trade disputes? Will America's trading partners see this as a sign of stability, or as a new source of uncertainty? The world's leaders are watching closely, recalibrating their strategies and preparing for the next round of negotiations. What does it mean for Trump's agenda? The former president built much of his platform on bold, unilateral action. Now, with new legal boundaries in place, the political landscape has shifted. Analysts and campaign strategists are already debating how this will shape future elections and policy debates. The world is still processing this historic moment, which will be analyzed for years to come. Historians, economists, and policymakers will study the ripple effects of this decision, seeking to understand how a single court ruling changed the course of global trade. For now, the world holds its breath, waiting to see what comes next in this ever-evolving story. To truly understand the significance of this week's Supreme Court ruling, it's important to look back at the roots of the policies that brought us here. The story begins several years ago, with a dramatic shift in how the United States approached global trade. During his 2016 campaign and throughout his presidency, Donald Trump made trade a central issue. He argued that for decades, other countries had taken advantage of the U.S., leading to lost jobs and shuttered factories across the nation. Trump promised to put America first, and to fight for better deals. Embracing the nickname Tariff Man, Trump saw tariffs as a powerful tool to rebalance trade. He believed that by imposing taxes on imported goods, he could pressure foreign governments to change their practices and protect American industries from unfair competition. This marked a sharp departure from decades of U.S. policy, which had favored free trade agreements and open markets. Previous presidents had championed deals like NAFTA and the World Trade Organization, aiming to lower barriers and encourage global commerce. Trump, however, saw these deals as flawed and set out to rewrite the rules. In 2018, the Trump administration imposed steep tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, citing national security concerns. The move was intended to revive American manufacturing and reduce dependence on foreign metals, especially from countries like China and Russia. However, these tariffs quickly angered some of America's closest allies, including Canada and the European Union. They argued that the U.S. was unfairly targeting friends, not just rivals. In response, these countries imposed their own retaliatory tariffs on American goods, sparking a wave of trade disputes. The conflict escalated even further with China, the world's second-largest economy. Both sides slapped tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods, leading to a tit-for-tat trade war that rattled global markets and created uncertainty for businesses and consumers alike. While some U.S. industries like steel saw short-term gains, many others suffered. Farmers faced plummeting exports as foreign markets dried up. Manufacturers struggled with higher costs for imported materials. Across the country, workers worried about layoffs and rising prices for everyday goods. Critics argued that the tariffs ultimately hurt the very people they were meant to protect. They pointed to damaged relationships with allies, lost export opportunities, and increased costs for American families. Supporters, meanwhile, insisted that tough action was necessary to defend U.S. interests. This deep division over trade policy set the stage for a major legal challenge, one that would eventually make its way to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. The outcome would have lasting implications for how America manages its economic relationships with the world. The legal challenge that would eventually reach the Supreme Court began as a determined, years-long effort by a coalition of American businesses. These business leaders, representing a wide range of industries, were deeply concerned about the impact of new tariffs and trade policies on their operations and the broader economy. They believed that the government's actions threatened not only their bottom lines, but also the fundamental principles of fair competition and open markets that had long defined American commerce. Their legal teams argued forcefully that the president had overstepped constitutional authority by imposing sweeping tariffs without direct approval from Congress. They contended that such significant decisions about trade policy should not rest solely in the hands of the executive branch, but must be subject to the checks and balances outlined in the Constitution. The case, officially titled American Importers Alliance versus United States, centered on the claim that Congress alone holds the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. The plaintiffs argued that by delegating too much authority to the president, Congress had violated the separation of powers. In response, the government defended its actions by pointing to laws like the Trade Expansion Act, which they argued gave the president the legal authority to impose tariffs under certain circumstances, especially when national security or economic stability was at stake. Initially, the Court of International Trade sided with the government, ruling that the president's actions were within the scope of the law, as written by Congress. This decision was a setback for the business coalition, but it did not end the legal battle. On appeal, however, a federal circuit court raised important questions about whether Congress had delegated too much of its constitutional power to the executive branch. The judges expressed concern about the potential for unchecked presidential authority in matters of trade. This split between the lower courts set the stage for a historic Supreme Court review. The justices would now be tasked with examining the delicate balance of power between Congress and the president, and determining how the United States should govern its role in global trade for years to come. On August 26, 2025, the Supreme Court limited the president's tariff authority. The ruling focused on future actions, requiring Congress to provide clear, specific instructions. The decision invalidates broad national security justifications for tariffs. The majority opinion emphasized the non-delegation doctrine, requiring clear guidelines for delegated powers. Future tariffs need congressional review and reauthorization. Dissenting justices argued the decision hampers the executive's ability to respond to threats. Practically existing tariffs remain, but new ones require congressional approval. The Supreme Court's decision has real-world economic consequences. It reduces uncertainty, allowing businesses to plan without sudden tariff threats. This stability could prevent future consumer price hikes. However, industries benefiting from tariffs may face renewed foreign competition. The ruling could influence the US dollar and stock market, initially favoring stability. The long-term economic outcome depends on Congress and the president's cooperation. The ruling shifts trade policy power from the White House to Congress. Presidents previously had wide latitude in trade matters. Now, Congress must take clear stances. This change challenges President Trump's tariff-based platform. Congress must now directly handle trade policies, exposing internal divisions. Trade policy will become a prominent issue in elections, with candidates articulating specific positions. The decision resonated globally, with cautious optimism from US allies. The EU sees it as a return to a stable, rules-based order. China views it as evidence of US political division, but also a strategic advantage. Developing nations welcome the shift to a congressionally driven trade policy. International bodies like the WTO may see this as a chance to mediate trade disputes. The global business community praises the decision for reducing political risk. Experts predict a legislative scramble as Congress becomes the primary trade policy arena. Bills will aim to grant limited tariff authority or roll back existing tariffs. The risk of gridlock is real, but cooperation could lead to stability. The court's decision leaves questions about the intelligible principle standard. The transition to a Congress-led system will be contentious, but could stabilize policy long-term. The ruling shifts trade policy power, affecting prices and international diplomacy. It challenges President Trump's agenda and tests Congress's ability to forge a trade strategy. The debates over trade and tariffs are crucial for informed citizenship. Stay engaged and informed, as decisions in Washington will impact lives globally. The story of American trade is being rewritten, involving all of us.